Newsfirst, Newsline with Salpitikorala.
Hello, good evening and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. Now then, this evening we've got, obviously we need to talk about the need to protect our children. And according to UNICEF, children suffer atrocities across the world. And the blame is squarely put on legislators and governments of the day in different countries for not paying enough attention to the rights of children. Now, today, before I introduce my guest, let me say this, that it's more than 80 days since President Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed to the position as president. And by his own admission, President Wickremesinghe arrived and came forward because of the economic crisis and the dollar crisis that Sri Lanka has faced. Well, sadly, 80 days later, he has neither solved the economic crisis nor has he solved the dollar crisis. And we have yet to see an action plan that appears to show that he is on his way to resolving these matters. At least, and at the moment, apart from the economic and the dollar crisis, we've also got another crisis, and that's called the interest crisis, which of course will result in up to 1 million people losing their jobs or facing a reduced earning capacity, and of course the closure of several small businesses. The World Bank has said that Sri Lanka's economy will shrink this year by approximately 9.2% and next year by another 4.2%. The government appears to have no plan to resolve either of these crises, and to date, certainly no action plan. And the only action plan that we've seen so far is to beg for dollars from friendly nations, but there's a limit to what you can do. Now, in light of all this, due to the devaluation of the rupee, prices went sky high. Fuel prices went up and the local transport charges nearly doubled, or they have doubled. And fertilizer is another issue. From per ton of 7,000 rupees for the paddy farmers, the price is now a staggering 200,000 rupees a ton. That's about 360,000 rupees for the rest of it, other than paddy. And the food prices have gone up so high that it suffered an inflation of approximately 95%. Fuel's gone up too. And the price of everything is nearly doubled. The urban middle class have found this to be absolutely non-sustainable. So much so that some of the urban middle class find it unable to employ domestic aids because of the rising prices and so on. And therefore, sometimes they're unable to leave them, the domestics, to leave them to look after their children. And that in turn means that adults, parents who want to go out there and protest and show their dissatisfaction at what's happening to all of us here in the country, may find that because they're leaving their children behind, but this time they've got no one to leave their children with. Therefore, they take their children along with them. But we have to remember that children have their own rights. And in UNICEF are extremely concerned about the atrocities that children suffer at the hands of various agencies and non-performing governments, to put it mildly. And so this evening, I've got here with me a child rights specialist, if you like, from the Child Protection Force is the organization that our guest works for. But of course, she's here in her own capacity. Milani Salpitikorala, very good evening to you, and thank you very much for being on the program and for putting up with me with my one eye and trying to read all this.
Thank you so much, Faraz. Thank you.
Now then, Milani, I have to ask you, as a mother of children, do you think that these people yesterday who turned up at Goldface, not to protest, in fact, but to mark the loss of life of various people during the peaceful protest that happened some weeks earlier, do you think that they made a tremendous mistake by taking their children with them? Shouldn't they have thought otherwise?
See, this is if there was a parent who knowingly took their child into a dangerous situation, then there is a process of how the law enforcement should act, because there's a provision in our law that has the authority for the police or the law enforcement to arrest a parent or a caregiver who is negligent towards a child who is under the age of 12 years. So, but then the problem here is, I suppose yesterday's protest was peaceful at the beginning, or it was peaceful, and it was specifically to commemorate the lives of the ones who were lost during the protest earlier, and they were going to light lamps from what I heard. So it seems to have been a peaceful protest, but at what point did it become violent? Did it become violent when the law enforcement authorities chased the people away and forcibly tried to grab these children from their parents? So in that case, then it is a violation of the rights of the child in that case. However, see, what we need to understand, Faraz, is that as a nation, one of our first priorities should be to protect our children. So in such a case, if law enforcement is not trained enough on the process of how to arrest a parent, if the parent has done something wrong, and thereafter to follow the procedure, if they're going to detain the parent and to protect the child, so then we do have a problem.
I see. So when the police sort of pluck the children off their parents, to obviously the child's clinging on to their parents for dear life almost, is that wrong, legally speaking?
Oh, yes, I think that is absolutely wrong, because one thing is that obviously the police can't use so much of force, especially on a child. And at that point, if the parents were not violent, if they were not harming public property or being violent towards the police, then there is a legal procedure of how these things should be done. Parents should be arrested. Then the immediate call needs to be made to the probation officer if the police thinks that the child is unsafe. And thereafter, it should take the usual legal procedure of where a court decides whether this child is safe or not with those parents. But you don't grab a child away from the safety of the parent. No, mm-hmm. At that point, I suppose the children were, I think I saw the children were holding the parents' hand, or some of the parents were carrying the children. So at that point, the children were quite safe at the hands of the parents. But this, I suppose, yesterday's event specifically created chaos where it became violent. And there were a lot of videos being shared of how children were being grabbed. And what we need to think of now is, regardless of who has created this, whether it was a parent or whether it was a law enforcement, regardless, who is going to be responsible for that psychological trauma that child is going to go through now, because it is going to be a long-lasting one. And here we are trying to take police officers in uniforms into schools to show children that this is the person responsible to protect you. Don't be afraid of this uniform. But that child from yesterday, or the few children who have witnessed it, would probably, be petrified of the uniform of the law enforcement for their entire life.
And Milani, I've been following social media, and there is a section of social media who are saying that the parents should never have taken their children with them. However, as I pointed out earlier in the opening part of this, the rights of the parents to protest is enshrined in our Constitution, and we can't have the fact that the parents, due to the economy and due to the, I'd say, the mismanaged economy, that because of that, the parents probably can't afford either the fuel to take the children and leave them with the grandparents, or have domestics at home, trusted domestics to take care of the children. So therefore, the safest option is to take the children with them. Nevertheless, the children themselves have legal rights to be there.
You're right. So the issue isn't actually whether a child has a right to protest or whether a child needs to be here. The freedom of assembly and freedom of expression are rights protected under the Constitution for all of us, adults, children, all of us. And everyone has a right to protest. And if these parents, obviously what was being shared was that they're going to commemorate the lives of the ones who were lost, and they were going to light lamps, so as peaceful as it can be. But we did witness a lot of tear gas trucks and soldiers with arms who were ready to go to war with their citizens. And also the fact that on a Sunday evening, the Golf-Face Green is full of children who have come there to play for leisure. So it is not just the children yesterday who were being dragged away, but also the other children who witnessed this, who are going to be petrified for a very long time of our law enforcement officers. So, yeah, I mean, when it does come to a situation where you don't have a support network to take care of your children, and you have a right to protest, and you know that this protest is not violent, you absolutely have a right to take your child anywhere you want to go, as long as you know that your child is safe.
And there would have been a legitimate expectation that almost a service, if you like, to mark the fact that so many people lost their lives and so on, is hardly likely to become violent.
Absolutely. And when people say they're going to light lamps and remember the dead, it's usually not a violent protest. And I think there were not only these parents with their children, there were a lot of very peaceful people there, devoid of any political biases, just people who wanted to dissent. But given that, also I'm saying that there is a great responsibility of our parents, to know that your child is safe at all times. So had they known that it was going to get violent, or had they known that it will be violent, then it is their responsibility to take their exit and take the child and leave, so that they know that their child is safe. And I have to say this, that we do get a lot of children who come here with various anxiety-related issues, very small children from maybe age 3-4 up to about 16-17. And we had a few of them whose anxiety developed within the past few months. And one of the main reasons was when they see armed soldiers on the road now, that they get petrified and they can't sleep, and this has been causing them a lot of anxiety. So I suppose it is a responsibility of our state to protect our children from this, and to show our children that law enforcement is there to protect them and no one else.
On that note, Milani, let's go for a short break and take a peek at this evening's headline news from that absolutely wonderful Newsfirst Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break, shall we?
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali. A
trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, 25% for 2 months, 25.5% for 4 months. Valuable FD, the symbol of stability.
Sri Lanka must have one national policy that does not change with every government, says President. Court turns down police request to shut down Goalface protest. 4 people arrested during Aragale commemoration granted bail. Human Rights Commission demands answers from the IGP for police violence at Goalface. Multiple trade unions demand government to provide relief to the people. Fertilizer tender marred in controversy.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. Tonight our guest is Ms. Milani Salpitikorala, who is of course an attorney at law, and the organization that she works with is the Child Protection Force. It's fair to say that they specialize in child rights and also with abused women and so on. Milani, could I ask you, what exactly should happen in the instance where a parent is with a child and the parent is arrested for whatever crime that they may have committed according to the policeman on duty?
So ideal situation is if a parent is arrested and there is a child with the parent at that time, and the police has detained that parent, then they have to go at the police station. They have to immediately inform the probation officer of that area. So the probation officer knows that there is a child who is in need of care and protection at that point. Or if the person arrested has somebody else, like a grandparent of a child or a next of kin, then they can call and ask them to come. But if it is in the view of the police that this child is unsafe, or it is in the best interest of the child that the child needs to be separated, in that case, they have to immediately inform the probation officer, and they have to also file the case in court, and it is a responsibility of the court to make the order as to where the child is going to be placed. So what depends on the parent who was arrested, it depends on the parent who was arrested and when they will come out, whether the child is going to be given back to the parent, whether the child is going to be left with the next of kin, or whether the child is going to be institutionalized through the state. So that is a responsibility of the court, and it is a responsibility of the law enforcement authority to immediately inform the court and also immediately inform the probation officer. Mm-hmm. Especially in instances, leave aside what happened yesterday, but in a lot of instances where both parents are drug abusers or substance abusers, and there are children who are neglected. So in such a case, the usual procedure is what I just told you.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so then after it goes to court, of course, it will take the usual legal process, and say a child is deprived of the parent or taken away from the parent, then of course there needs to be a reasonable ground to identify why the child has been separated. All authorities responsible, including a court of law, has to act in the best interest of the child. So taking into regard yesterday's incident, if the children were safe with the parents and it was a peaceful protest, then I suppose the best interest of the child was to stay with the parents and not to be separated. But if the parents are charged, and I suppose they weren't charged, if they were charged, then the usual process of a court procedure, and the court will decide where to place the child. And ideally, no force can be used on children, even if a child has violated a law or has, committed a crime. So that is something I suppose our law enforcement authorities need to keep in mind, because ultimately when it does go to court, it is going to come back to that individual officer who made the arrest or who did the violation, and not to the person who gave the orders. So they are going to have to appear in court by themselves and go through the whatever order that the court makes against them.
And so obviously from what you've been saying, the matter of arresting a parent who's got children with them or in the same house or together like yesterday, this can't be done with any flippancy at all. It must be well thought out and take into regard many considerations because, of course, like you say, otherwise, are these officers who do the actual arresting, can they be personally liable for sort of deviating from due process?
So yes, if it is usually a violation of human rights or a violation of their duties that they have done, and it can be proven, they will be personally liable, and especially with regard to their jobs and career-wise, they will have to face the music alone.
And why is it, Milani, that that UNICEF say that children around the globe are suffering sort of various atrocities, and over in Sri Lanka, is it or is it not the right of a child to expect to have food on the table and to an education, the right to food, the right to education, and ultimately the right to life? Are these enshrined in our constitution?
Like you said, every child does have a right to the whole list that you said. We are a signatory state of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we as a state, we are under obligation to make sure that our children have all these rights available to them. So yes, food on the table, proper health care, right to a family life, from everything should be available. But I suppose for us, the problem is that our state hasn't realized that child protection must be a national policy. Child protection must be a part of our national policy and a part of our law, and it needs to be prioritized. And if that actually does happen, I believe everything else is going to fall into place.
Mm-hmm. And Milani, how fares our Child Protection Agency and the systems in place? How does it fare at the moment in Sri Lanka?
I mean, I'll say this again, as I've been saying all the time. Currently, at least for now, I suppose we do have enough laws. We have a lot of systems in place. For example, a lot of people are unaware of the number of officers we have in our provincial secretariat officers and our district secretariat officers, specially placed there for children, women, and young people. We have a National Child Protection Authority. We have the probation services. We have, I think, parliamentary committees on children. So the systems are in place. We have many civil society organizations who are on the ground working for children, tireless work for children. And I do see a delay within our justice system, which causes a lot of secondary victimization on children. But our systems are in place. And the problem is that of implementation and that of resource allocation for our state officers on women and children. So the resource allocation from the national budget is a minimum that comes into women and children, that comes into the Police Women and Children's Bureau. So these are the things that I suppose we as a nation need to talk about and obviously solve, because there are many, many people who can easily help us and advise us to overcome these challenges. And that is also part of being a member, a signatory to the UNCRC, is in our reports that we submit to them, to the committee, when we talk to them about our problems, when we tell them we have these issues with regard to child protection in our country, it is their duty. It is a duty of the committee to recommend other member states to help us with these things. So, for example, trainings for law enforcement, more resources allocated towards our National Child Protection Authority, or more trainings on, say, officers who specifically do video evidence recording on children. So, I mean, we shouldn't take it as in an offense that we can't provide these things for our children. I think we need to think of it constructively and write our reports honestly, so that we do get these resources and recommendations, at least from another state, I suppose.
I know that our Foreign Office is hard pressed for professional speakers, and you've said it very nicely. But I think what you're saying is that you shouldn't be painting a rosy picture if that picture isn't rosy. Is that what you're saying?
At the cost of our children, exactly what I'm saying, yes.
And in terms of budgets and so on, how much more money ought to be allocated in the pursuit of the protection and the sustenance of the rights of our children?
I'm sorry, Faz, I can't exactly comment on exactly how much, but I can mention to you some of the challenges. If you go to, again, I can't mention names, but if you go to certain police stations, go to the women and children's desk, see how they operate. Sometimes a mother would come with 4 children and breastfeeding another with another one in the belly, and she would have no place to sit and breastfeed her child. And instances where if a child survivor of crime walks into a police station to complain, then you also see the entire crimes division of how other people are arrested and put behind bars, and how this law enforcement system, how the system of justice towards our children is not holistic enough, is not child friendly, is not survivor friendly. So this is what, and this is not rocket science also, it's simple things. And I suppose there are many people who will be willing to support if these things are initiated by the state itself.
Thank you very much, Milani Salpitikorala, for your time with Newsline. It's an important subject. But actually, there's one last question, if I may. Children fainting in schools, children given meals thanks to the humanity of the teachers and other parents and local do-gooders. Is this the way forward, or should there be something permanently in place that will assist all these people without having to go around with the begging bowl?
Absolutely. It shouldn't be the way. It should be, again, state-sponsored, and state needs to think of ways on how they can do it. Because, I mean, this is a direct result of the political crisis that happened. Our children are fainting in schools, they're dying of hunger because of the political crisis and nothing else. So then somebody needs to take responsibility, and the state needs to take responsibility. But also think of a lot of other ways. There are excellent professors, there are so many good brains in Sri Lanka that can easily come up with solutions to all these challenges, and these things need to be taken into consideration, and the state needs to act fast, especially on child protection and health of the child education.
Because after all, the children are our future. And Milani Salpitikorala, thank you very much for being with Newsline Live again. And that's the way it was, ladies and gentlemen. And you can now listen to the primetime news from News First. In the meantime, as always, take care and God bless you all.